Hi everyone, so today's video is going to be a little bonus Q&A that I wanted to do because it's the end of the year and I wanted to end off 2020 on like a little fun, cozy note. So I have some tea and I asked you to ask me questions both on my Tumblr and on my YouTube. So I have about like 17 questions here that I'm going to answer, and let's jump right in. The first question is, how do you get inspired to work on a brand new project after spending months on your last novel? This is actually a really good question because it's kind of something that I struggled with. So when I came back home from school, I had just finished Mothwork. I finished Mothwork in March and I came home just like a week or two later. And so I was really feeling nostalgic for Mothwork and I didn't know what to do, and I was going to write a project called The Sun Only Drowns Us, but I ended up avoiding working on something new so much that I wrote a sequel, which is what I'm currently writing. So I am probably not the right person to ask this question because I kind of have like genuine anxiety when it comes to like starting new projects. So I totally feel you. It's kind of hard and nerve-wracking to start a brand new project after pouring your heart out into something new. But if I were to suggest something, I would say take it in baby steps. There is no need to rush starting a new project. If you want to start a new project but you're feeling overwhelmed, just take it in little bite-sized chunks. If you're an outliner, maybe outline the first scene or the first half scene, whatever you can. If you're a pantser, maybe you can write just a few hundred words in the perspective of the character. It doesn't have to end up going into the book, but just small things that can get you into the mood and the new world of what you're writing. I also would suggest perhaps reading work that is more in line with the new project that you're trying to work on. I find reading something that is in a similar vein can kind of get you in the right headspace. So the next question is, have you noticed any similarities between your writing now and your writing when you first started out? What has stayed the same? I guess obviously the most obvious similarity is that I'm still writing the same thing that I was writing when I first started writing. This is Fostered Book 3. I wrote it when I was in grade 8. Ooh, sentence structure maybe. I shake out 2 pills from the Tylenol bottle, shove it back into its place before snatching the Neosporin as well. Quietly walking over to the fridge, I pop a few ice cubes from their trays, gather them up in a bundle of paper towel before biting my lip as I stare ahead at the quarter-full coffee machine. With a sigh, I place my gatherings onto the kitchen's countertop, snatch a mug from the cupboard, then pour the coffee in, sugar and creamer, adding to the drink a few minutes later. I think, yeah, sentence structure, actually, kind of looking at this, I kind of write similarly, which is kind of strange. Certainly, I do think sentence structure might be a thing, kind of knowing where to interject details onto the line. 13-year-old Rachel was onto something. Sometimes figuring out how not to start each sentence with I, learning when to interject with detail, learning when to jump into dialogue. I think that is a bit similar. Obviously, I think I'm much better at it now, but that might be the biggest similarity for me. So the next question is, what is the weirdest / strangest thing you've ever written? Doesn't have to be published. So I started writing a story a few years ago in the perspective of a cactus. So a girl breaks up with her boyfriend and replaces her boyfriend because she's like, haha, men suck, with a cactus. I haven't finished it, but I really like it. Every time I go back and read it, it's really funny. I just need to figure out what I'm doing with it. I think it might work better, obviously, as flash fiction because I don't think I could carry out a cactus narrative for that long. Next question is, what's something you learned from this semester? Updated thoughts on your writing degree so far. I love your channel and blog so much. Thank you. And if you couldn't tell from how I was reading that question, ooh, I have thoughts. What's something I learned from this semester? Let's start with that. Just in general, that I have a very low threshold for things that bother me or like things that are difficult for me to do or that I need to force myself to do. But that doesn't mean I won't stop. And sometimes I need to stop. And so I think sometimes I need somebody to force me to stop. But in terms of writing, what's something I learned from this semester? That I'm much better at short fiction than I thought. I'm not perfect at short fiction, but when I was writing short fiction for class and even just for little prompts, I felt like I had like kind of an intrinsic muscle memory that knows how to like write a short story. It's not perfect and it still has problems, but I've found that that muscle is developing a lot more to the point where when I'm doing something wrong in a short story, like I know. So that's kind of something interesting. Updated thoughts on my writing degree. I really, really don't like my writing degree right now. My writing degree, I guess, just to put it in short form, is very reliant, I think, on in-person communication. I think, obviously, the writing degree is a very hands-on degree. If you don't know how my degree functions, it's all workshops. So all of it is just people talking about writing and critiquing writing and talking just in a group. That's really difficult to do over Zoom. And so because of that, there was a lot less, I think, participation than there would be. Zoom fatigue is a real thing. And so I think the amount of people we would be workshopping would just become way too much in an online setting. It became really tiring. A lot of students were struggling, so I didn't get a lot of my critiques. I got about like 30% of them, which I can't even blame my classmates for. It's very difficult to be a student in COVID right now, and the writing degree requires, at least like for me when I'm doing critiques, that's like 5 to 10 hours just to critique, like, let's say like 10 poems, if not more. Usually I'm about 2 hours per poem, if not like 1 hour per poem. And so it's a huge time commitment, and doing that online is a lot more difficult, especially when students are going through a lot right now. And so in general, the writing degree is a lot of work, but online it was like even worse. I think poetry I enjoyed because I have been getting into poetry. I don't know as much about poetry, and so I was learning a lot more, and there was a lot more to critique in poetry. My professor split the class in half, so it was like a 15-person workshop for one group and then a 15-person workshop for like group B. And so that worked really well. It gave me like a good taste of critiquing, and I think I've gotten much better at critiquing poetry. I feel like I went from like a not poet to a poet at the end of the semester. At one point in the semester, I started calling myself a poet. Fiction, it was a bit more tricky. I obviously know a lot more about fiction, and so I think it's a bit tricky. I have been thinking that if school stays online, I might take a break from my writing degree. I'm on track to get an English degree right now because I've been taking a lot of English electives. If school goes online next year, I might take a break from the writing degree just because I think, especially I go to school so far away and I went to this school for this program, I don't want to waste it online. It's just difficult to transition in this time. I think everybody is struggling. It's not just me, it's also the faculty, it's also my other classmates. And so this question is kind of interesting because also there's COVID to keep in mind. I definitely have felt for the first time a lot of regret in getting my writing degree. I loved first year. I adored it. And I loved the in-person aspect of my degree. The actual culture played a lot into why I loved my degree. Next question is, as a discovery writer, what signals to you that a chapter isn't working? And do you rework them, store them away in a doc, or scrap entirely? So what signals to me? I genuinely physically feel wrong. My writing process is very intuitive, and it's also very physical. If writing isn't going right, I can start to feel physically ill. And so if I know a scene is going wrong, it's in my gut. I know. So I know that's not really helpful, but when a chapter isn't working, I've been writing so long and I've been pantsing for so long. That's the only process I've ever used that I know when something's not going right. Sometimes it takes a bit longer than usual, but immediately, like right now, I'm writing a scene and I know it's not going right. Does that mean I'm still trying to make it work? Yeah. But at this point, I know in my gut, I'm going to have to go back and rejig something because it's not right. And I'm feeling that in my chest. Do I rework them? Sometimes I will rework it. Like right now, I am desperately trying to rework it because I don't know what else to do. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I will spend weeks or like a month trying to rework and I know it's not working just because I'm a bit stubborn and I want it to work and I don't want all that hard work to go to waste. And then in the end, I usually, if I still feel that way, I do have a separate document called book name trash pile that I will put all of like the cutout parts in. And I don't know how big Feeding Habits trash pile is. Let's see. So Feeding Habits is over 8,000 words in scrapped words. I think I've had 40,000 words in cutouts before. So it just really depends on how the book is going. Sometimes I never throw anything out though, unless it's like 2 words. If I have a line that isn't fitting, I will put it in that document. Do you normally decide on a central theme for a chapter before writing it, or does it emerge as you write it? Usually emerges as I write it. I don't really go into a chapter knowing what theme I want. Usually it emerges as the chapter title. So for example, right now I'm working on a chapter of Feeding Habits called Something Held. That came out of a crossword puzzle that I think Lonan is filling out a crossword puzzle. I don't know who's filling it out. I don't know. The answer is isolation, and the clue that I searched up when I searched up isolation clues for crosswords, one of them was Something Held. And so that is giving me, now that it's emerged a bit earlier in the chapter, a thematic string to follow. Sometimes it emerges way early, like mine is, or sometimes it emerges quite late into the game, like at the very end, and then I will go and reweave that theme when I'm doing like a second pass over the chapter. Next question is, what's your favorite thing you wrote this year? It's a chapter of feeding habits called coup de grace, and I can't say that properly. That's chapter 4 of feeding habits. I really like that chapter, and I think the reason why is because I have such a positive memory of writing it. It was like a summer day, and I was truly enjoying myself. I was listening to Jeff Buckley, like the Grace album, for the first time, really, and enjoying the sunshine. I have a vlog of me writing that chapter, which I'll link if you want to see all the happy vibes. But writing that chapter was just really great. It's not perfect, I don't know, but I love reading it again. I think it has so much there, and I'm not sure when I'll have the video of me reading it up, but I did record it, and I just love that chapter so much. I also like a lot of the poems that I wrote this year. I wrote this really cool one that's narrated by an orca whale. Next question is, if Reeve, Harrison, and Lonan each published a poetry chapbook, what would it be called, and what would be the themes? So if Reeve wrote a chapbook, like, she would probably call it I'm Better Than You and Other Poems. And it would be about her being better than other people and also insecurity and sexuality. Harrison would write a chapbook called Broken Up or Breaking Up, and it would maybe have like a phone on it. Breakup poems, but like it's kind of like maybe in like the form of, oh, I'm gonna write this. It's like maybe in the form of voicemails, and like all of the poems are like kind of like cell phone. Your call is breaking up. Right now he's really sad about his relationship with Lonan, and he's like salty about it, even though they're not, I guess they are still broken up, but I don't know why he's upset. He's just upset, and so he would write like breakup poems. And if Lonan published a chapbook, it would probably be like, I hate myself and I don't want to be myself anymore. It would be about not liking yourself. You don't like your brain, and you want to give your brain to somebody else and take somebody else's brain because you hate yourself. Next question is, I'd love to hear if you have any other interests or hobbies besides writing. I do. I play guitar. You gotta bear with me on this one because I don't have a capo and I don't play this guitar, but I've been learning this song called Plans by Marika Hackman. I don't know what I'm doing. So hard to play. That's enough. That's enough. Okay. Yeah, so I play that. I play the guitar. Usually better than that. I've been playing the guitar for like 5 years. I also am an artist. I draw things, and I like doing that. I learned how to draw because I didn't want to pay other people to draw my characters because I'm cheap. Not that I don't think supporting artists is valuable. I'm just incredibly cheap. And what else do? I do a lot of things. I don't know, man. I have a lot of hobbies. I also am a photographer. I like to take pictures of myself and other people because people don't take pictures of myself. I'm calling Sarah and Ashley out. They never take pictures of me, but I take lots of pictures of them because I kind of force them to do that. I cook. I love cooking. I love baking. I like film a lot. I haven't made a film in a long time, but I love film. I love video editing. I love graphic design. I like making book covers. I have a lot of hobbies. I do a lot of things. I don't like to not be doing things because then I have to think about myself, and I would prefer not to do that. Next question. I know you have a lot of interest in the other arts, visual and music. So how do they intersect with your writing? In what ways are they separate? Sometimes, like when I'm playing like a guitar song, like I really get into it and I'm like think about my book and I'm like, yeah, man, like I could totally see Lonan and Harrison right now in my head. And like this is so angsty. Like I've learned a song called Comfort by Julia Jacqueline, and just think of like a sad montage of like the boys not, being together, and this is what that sounds like. Very out of tune. This guitar doesn't like me. That's what that sounds like, and I like think about the boys, and it's really good. Visually, I draw a lot of my characters, like I said, because I'm very cheap, and so I like to draw my own art. I don't do it very often anymore because, I don't know, I just do other things. I also make a lot of book covers. In what ways are they separate? I mean, my music, I usually just learn covers of songs that I really like, so a lot of the time that has nothing to do with like my writing, but sometimes I'll choose songs that like I would soundtrack my book to. I know a lot of daughter songs. I've been learning a lot of Marika Hackman, and so that's pretty relevant. Next question is, what would you say is the best way or technique you like the most to get back on track after facing severe writer's block? I actually made an entire video on this, so I have a few different methods that I use. I'll link it, but my favorite method when I'm in a severe writer's block is the immersion technique, where I will go into a bathtub and I will put my head under the water and usually like get the water up till around my eyes, like basically until like my nose is the only thing visible, and so that I obviously can breathe, and I will just put myself like in the membrane of that world. If you're interested, a writer that I like named Sharon Bela, she wrote about this on her blog. It's called Underwater Writing. I actually go underwater when I do this technique. I didn't know that she had this technique, and I made my video before then, but it's funny because she calls her technique underwater writing, and I actually do that, but I am underwater when I do that. It's my favorite way to immerse myself. I just become the character in the scene, and that's my favorite way to get back after a hard time of writing. The next question is, I'd like to know how you come up with scene ideas as a pantser. I just do. I don't really have a method. I'm a pantser, so I just sit down and things happen, and I know that's really unhelpful, but that's genuinely what happens. I don't really come up with things. I just sit down, and usually the universe gives me a scene idea. I wish it was more helpful, but that's genuinely what happens. Are there main characters that get a lot less attention in the books than others? And if so, how do you fix that without their scenes feeling too forced? In my book, yeah, there are, like, Foster and Darren have been like kind of shoved out of the cast. I'm sorry. How do I fix it without their scenes feeling forced? Put them in scenes with the relevant characters and make them relevant to the relevant characters. Like, Foster's irrelevant now, basically, oops. But he's Harrison's best friend. Has that made it easier to write him into feeding habits? No, but if I wanted to, I could write scenes of them interacting, and then therefore that would bring him into Harrison's timeline, who is relevant because he's a point of view character. Next question is, if you had to be one of the feeding habits cast for a week, who would you be? I definitely wouldn't be Lonan. Lonan is just a horrible, depressing space to be in. If I were him for a day, I would try to make him feel better. I would like let him see the good parts of himself by like doing something nice for somebody else, because he's a very kind person. So that's what I would do, but that's more like charity work. If I were to be somebody that would be fun, I would be Harrison, because Harrison has no chill. Like, he loves being like kind of a goofball. He doesn't care like what other people think. And I've said this before on this channel, but I would love to be him, but I would also not want to be him. I just want to hang out with him so that he could take me to like a disco and karaoke, and we could like hang out and have a good time. But Harrison would be fun to be with. But right now he's actually quite angsty. So maybe the person that I would want to be is like his dog or something. The next question is, how do you come up with your stories? Where do you draw inspiration from? Is there any specific book, movie, or TV shows that stand out? How do I come up with my stories? Like I said, the answer's really unhelpful in that I just sit down and like a muse comes to me. Like a stork, is that what they're called? Like with the baby things? They like fly over me and like drop a parcel of ideas onto my head. I know that sounds really lofty, but that's what happens. Like, I don't do anything. Like, sometimes when I'm on a deadline and I'm forced to do something, like with my cult story, The Wolf Antelope Will Not Come For Us, I got an idea. Like I said, the stork dropped an idea on my head, but then I had to force myself to keep writing it. And so usually I will just try to write what comes next based on what I just wrote and kind of just parse my way through the situation. I know people say that that's bad writing technique, but I rely on inspiration. Where do I draw inspiration from? Music, TV shows that I like, other writing. And the next part of this question is any specific book, movie, or TV shows that stand out. I love The Girls by Emma Cline. Like, Emma Cline, at least in The Girls, has this very delicious prose style that I really like, that really inspires me. I also really like Eliza Robertson's prose style, so I read her stuff all the time. TV shows, I love Hannibal. I've been rewatching Hannibal for the third time. I love that show. The dialogue is really well written and kind of how I write dialogue. Not to like toot my own horn, because I think it's much better than mine, and like the writers are very talented on that show. But it's very similar to how I write dialogue. It's like writing in subtext. I always write within the subtext. I don't usually write what is actually happening, and if I do, it feels really uncomfortable. I like to write what isn't happening, but what is implied. So kind of writing underneath what I'm writing is a very weird technique, but kind of something that I love doing, and I think Hannibal does that a lot. I've said this before, Will talks a lot like Lonan, and so it's really helpful when I'm writing in his point of view to be reminded of how like Lonan would speak. And Will looks like Harrison, so we love Hugh Dancy in this house. So Hugh Dancy is an inspiration. How do you get over procrastination and fear of your writing being bad? I don't. I'm really poor at doing those things. And to be honest, when I procrastinate writing, I just let myself do it. Usually it's because I'm intensely scared. I have a huge problem with fear, and fear doesn't drive me to do anything. It drives me away from doing things. And so those two things are very linked to me that are showing up in this question, obviously. But I really struggle with procrastination with my writing because I'm just so scared of like messing something up or not knowing what to do. That kind of freezes me in place. So when I'm trying to get out of that, I will try to take baby steps. Like I will reread the work as far in advance as possible just so that my brain can start thinking. So if I need to read scene 5 of chapter 2, I will go back to scene 1 or even chapter 1 and read all of that until I get to scene 5 so that I feel like I'm in the headspace of the characters again. I'm in the world of the characters. But honestly, I'm not great at handling this. I really struggle with fearing that my writing is bad, and especially in Feeding Habits, like the Mothwork series, it is very polarizing and it is difficult to get over that. Sometimes you just genuinely have to keep writing, and then the next day you'll come back and reread it and be like, this isn't as bad. I know that it sucks, but it's kind of like an exposure response thing. The next question is, how do you create characters and make them as realistic as possible? I like to give them flaws. I like to give them contradictions. People are very contradictory. For example, I think I'm a very giving person and I'm very empathetic, but at the same time, I am a bit selfish with like the things that I know this is like making me sound horrible, but I usually like prioritize like what I want to do despite my givingness. And that's a huge contradiction right there. And so that adds a lot of complexity. I really do think contradictions are where strong characterization lies. Try to pinpoint the darkest thing about your character, the thing that they never want to reveal, and exploit it as much as possible in the narrative, even in subtle ways. So for example, Lonan, his biggest fear is that like all children become like they're the wicked stems of adults. He genuinely doesn't want to feel that way because I think he would love to be a father of his own one day, but he's just really terrified that one day I think his kids or kids around him are going to become like the wickedest parts of him, and like he's going to see the worst parts of himself reflected in an innocent thing. And so I like to exploit that in the narrative. I'm kind of a little bit evil, a bit maniacal, but that's kind of my favorite thing to do in creating realistic characters. Just choose their darkest fear and make it come true in every way possible. The next question is, what book has been the most influential to your writing style? Mine would have to be The Girls by Emma Cline, which I know you're also a big fan of. It's the first time I'd ever read flowery prose like that before, and it totally changed how I thought about my writing. I completely agree. The Girls was the most influential to my writing style. I was in grade 11 when I read that book, and it changed how I write because I had, like the asker said, never really seen writing like that. I wrote like that before I read The Girls, but I just didn't understand that was like a writing style. And so reading that book really unlocked a new wave of language for me. But that was definitely the number one most influential for me. I also really like Demigods by Eliza Robertson, hugely influential on my style. My friend Shaylin is also a fantastic writer, and her work always influences me and always inspires me. I've loved reading all of her work. They're just a joy to read. Something about how she uses language is just so delicate but punchy and impactfully subtle, and I love it. It's great. Shaylin is a wonderful writer. So that's gonna be the end of this video. We'll end that on like me uplifting my friends. So thank you guys for watching this. I drank a quarter of my tea and now it's cold, which I think is kind of a prerequisite in making tea. You can't make it unless, you let it cool down completely first. So anyway, I hope you guys have a wonderful 2021, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye. I have a really flat head, so this is pretty easy to do.